All right, so we have how I built my video podcasting studio in 2022, complete tour and gear walkthrough. I just saw this video pop up recommended. I have never seen it, so we were just gonna hit play. Right off the bat, I see a Rode pod mic there, so I'm guessing we're gonna use a few of those, but let's check it out.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Tom here with Innova Digital, and today
up,
we're going to go through how I built out this video podcasting studio in about 200.
Cool. So he's just going to do a quick walkthrough here, but right off the bat, I see 4 Rode pod mics on some just tabletop stands. Looks like a nice setup. You can see over in the corner here, it's a pretty big studio space, and we just have some kind of basic curtains here. Nice lighting though, so pretty cool. I'm guessing there might be a few issues with some echoes and audio just looking at this right off the bat, but let's keep going and we'll dive into it.
100 square feet. So when I set out to build this space, there were a couple of must-have things that were going to be important for me. So coming from the video background, having it be a video podcasting studio was absolutely top priority, right? So I wanted to have at least 3 cameras.
Real quick, it is a lot more work to do a video podcast versus just an audio-only podcast because, like you can see here, you need multiple cameras if you really want to do it right. Looks like we'll probably have a main wide-angle camera and then some kind of zoom-in cameras similar to the Joe Rogan podcast. And you need to be able to either switch them live, so you need another person for that, or you need to edit it after the fact, and that just takes a lot of time. So just a little heads up there.
That way I can get a wide shot of the room as well as a dedicated shot to either side of the table or to either party. I wanted to have 4 microphones so that in case we wanted to have groups of 4 in here, we could. Also wanted the space to be modular, that if we didn't have 4 people and we just had 2 people or 3 people.
So this is cool. We'll probably get into this later when he talks about the gear a little more, but you can see the wires, the cables are kind of in the way, I guess you'd say. I personally would like to see more of a permanent solution here. So, you can install boom arms through the desk or through the table and then run the cables underneath so they just kind of get out of the way. And that's a nice clean way. You can easily take them out too. If you only have 2 or 3 people, you can remove them, and all you have is just a little plate sticking in the desk. Just one kind of minor improvement I'd probably make, but let's keep watching.
That the space could be adapted to kind of suit those needs. Another huge thing for me was that I wanted to have the ability to live cut each episode. And so what I mean by that is typically when people would be doing stuff like this, they would hit record on all 3 cameras and then take all of that footage, go into the editing room and change things and cut things that way. And I knew pretty much immediately that I didn't want to do that because I have enough editing work as it is, and I don't want the extra editing of doing every individual podcast. I'll go into what that gear is.
Yeah, so if you have, I think it looks like in his case, he is recording a podcast and maybe he's doing the live switching on his own. And so it's not necessarily his show, it's other people's shows, they're talking, and that would work great. If you are doing your own podcast, you definitely need a second person to kind of run that in the background, a producer or something. So just a heads up there.
And what specifically it is in a minute, but as you can imagine, that is from Blackmagic in the A10 mini series. And so that speeds the workflow of everything up entirely.
Yeah, I actually looked into this myself, and that's exactly the same device that I would probably get if I was looking to do a video podcast with a little bit of live switching and recording ability. That's a great choice, and I think it's perfect for his setup.
Because everything gets live cut here. And so basically the editing is minimal. You're adding a little bit of a header, a footer, some pop-up text, and you're calling it a day. In fact, you could even program that sort of stuff into the ATEM software if you needed to do that. Another thing that was really important to me is I really wanted to have the space look professional and kind of cohesive without being overly cluttered or overly stylized. The look of things fairly minimal, and so far I feel like that has worked out well for me, and I think that it does give off a good result that I was looking for.
we just saw the Rodecaster Pro there, and now that we're into 2022, we have the Rodecaster Pro 2. So if you were gonna choose one, I would definitely get the newer one. It might cost a little more. I'm not sure on the price difference right now on those, but I am currently recording through a Rodecaster Pro 2, and it is amazing. It has tons of features, and a lot of flexibility. So whether you're going from a podcast to a stream to a live presentation, you can do anything with it. It's pretty cool. So I would just check out the new 2 model.
And then finally, as I've kind of alluded to, I wanted everything to be as easy as possible. So everything that is in this space is pretty much stuck here. It stays here. I don't move it around. So when somebody comes in or wants to do a podcast, we can just hit go pretty much. There's very minimal setup. And then by the time we hit done on the recording, I basically can take that file, upload it to Dropbox for them, and they can be on their way. Everything is very quick and easy, and that just saves me a whole bunch of time, and I assume it will for you too. All right, so let's dive into the gear a little bit more. This is probably the boring section, but let's just talk about furniture and things that I did to kind of fill out the space. So first and foremost, I needed a table. I wanted one that was probably more newsroom style, kind of like a half crescent shaped thing, but frankly, it was really tough to find, and doing a custom build desk just probably wasn't in the cards for me starting out. And so I decided to go with this table. It has a beautiful gray top. It's thick, sturdy wood, and it can house 4 people, and if not more. And in fact, there's even a nice cable pass through throughout the table too, which is super nice. So this was kind of the main table. I had 4 matching kind of office chairs. There's nothing too special about these, but felt nice, comfortable, looked.
You might not think too much about this, but the chairs look nice. They're matching whatever. That's comfortable enough for people sitting for an hour or more. The table, I think, is nice because it doesn't stand out. It's nice dark. You really focus more on the people and microphones and stuff. So I think that those are things to think about. Don't go too crazy unless for some reason you want your branding in it, but you can always put that in the background or something else too.
It's good. Again, kind of clean cut and professional, maybe more so than stylized. I've noticed that some people start giving it the old wiggle, and that is not as ideal, but that's more of a self-restraint thing than anything else. Aside from that, there's a nice thick rug underneath us that hopefully absorbs some of the sound. Say the biggest thing aside from the table and the chairs, I guess, is this backdrop over here to my left, and so that is pretty unique. I've noticed.
Yeah, this is pretty cool. I don't know where he got it or if this was custom built or whatever, but definitely gives it a nice kind of techie vibe. So if you want to go for that, that's cool. I'm sure it absorbs some sound, and that's part of the reason for it. But it definitely gives it a feel that maybe podcasts may or may not want. So I don't know if that is something, in his case, I think he is recording other people's shows. Not sure about that, but just something to think about if you want to go kind of more muted and be able to like hang stuff up that kind of fits people's shows or something. Might be another way to go.
I noticed that this sort of 3D wall panel thing is a little bit more trendy these days, but I found ones that I haven't really found online as much. They're at 2 feet, I think a little bit bigger than most other ones, and they kind of give off, it doesn't look like you can see where they start and end like most tiles, so I really liked that. I think it looks good. I probably have some footage of how I built this thing, but I didn't want to glue them to the wall because gluing things to walls, especially in a space that I just lease, was not something that I had an interest in doing. So I guess the only final thing is to kind of seal this space off. I did put in 2 kind of big curtain systems, which is one of them you see behind me, and there's one on the other side there.
Yeah, so I touched on this. We can see these curtains. I'm pretty sure I have the exact same curtains behind me, and they're pretty thin. They don't do great job of, stopping sound and reflections. And I can definitely tell that this space looks like a big studio. So I'm sure that there's quite a bit of echo in here. It would be my assumption. I know there's big rugs and everything. Those definitely help. But if you could surround the space more, you can hang up some temporary, for film purposes, they have these like mobile curtains basically, and you can kind of surround the area with those, that might be a good way to just keep the echoes down. You can see the back wall wasn't really covered with much. Another option too would be to hang some panels from the ceiling, just some acoustic panels, and those would absorb sound as well. So there's not too many hard surfaces. So let's keep watching.
Kind of just basically kind of create a room, kind of give off the illusion that there is a room here. And that hopefully absorbs a little bit of sound. It gives people clean backdrops behind them so you can't see the rest of the studio. I think that it looks good and it works great, and that's another thing that I didn't have to drill into the walls. So that's the furniture. Let's dive into audio. So as you guys could probably tell, I opted to go with the Rodecaster and pod mic setup here. So there are 4 pod mics. I did a bunch of research on these, and I feel like they kind of live up to the hype for the price. They are extremely great quality. Sure, I would have preferred to go with, SM7Bs or something like that, but these are...
Yeah, so you're looking at $100 a piece versus $400 a piece. And, if you're just starting out, this is a great way to do it on a budget, but still get excellent quality. And 99% of the people won't notice the difference. And maybe this is a stylistic decision, but you can always put a foam cover over those so you don't have the silver standing out as much. But yeah, it's definitely a good way to go. And let's keep watching and see what else he has to say.
They're about a fourth of the price for this being a new venture, and something that I thought most people probably wouldn't have the ear to notice the difference with. I decided to go with the pod mics, and so far they've been great. I think they look great too, which has actually been a huge thing. I know that a lot of people opt to do windscreens over them or something like that, but seeing as we're kind of a video first podcasting space, as of now we're going to leave them like this. I think they look really cool. You also probably noticed that that's not on a boom arm or one of those, I don't know. I have one of those at the house and it's great, but I wanted people not to be fidgeting with it. I also felt like to get 4 of them was kind of expensive.
So this little B-roll shot, I don't know if he uses these kinds of boom arms, but they have the exposed springs and they have these giant pop filters sticking out. These probably are not what I would choose for video. I would choose something a little more low profile. They make some that come down and up. So mine comes from over the top here, but I could have it come low and up, and then it would be sort of out of the shot for video purposes, and people would less likely to mess with it. So there are some ways to do it. I would check out the Joe Rogan podcast for a great example on boom arms there.
Expensive, and I think that they are just really ugly to have on camera. I thought that just doing a straight tabletop mount was going to be the way to go on these. It does come with the downside of if people are smacking the table, you might get a little bit of noise off of that, which I know is not quite as great, but
quick clarification there. So that's maybe a misconception, but a tabletop stand or a boom arm that's attached to the table will both transfer the sound, because it literally goes through the arm into the microphone. And I guess that's one downside with the pod mics, is they don't have an external shock mount, and that is what will stop that sound if you tap the table or something. So the pod mic actually has it built in. You see it's on a kind of a little U there that suspends it, and then it has some internal stuff. But you'd have quite a bit better results with a separate shock mount. I don't know if you can see this one, but it looks like a little spider thing. You can see this literally rattles around in there, and that prevents a lot of the tapping sound from traveling into the mic.
I think that this setup just looks clean, and it's still able to be modular enough that, again, if we don't have 4 people on the show, we can just rip 2 of them, basically put them on the floor or something like that, quickly move them. We don't have to unscrew the arms. So basically these run XLR into the Rodecaster system, which, again, tons of other reviews. I won't talk about the Rodecaster system, but I think it's kind of industry standard for people that are wanting to do a podcast. No complaints with the Rodecaster system. The headphones, in case people do want to listen, so I actually have them below the table here. They are Mackie MC100s, and so I bought 4 of them. They sit below the table here, and frankly, I usually tell people that unless you really want to hear yourself, you don't need to, because it's pretty much a a thing that it's not going to matter to you. I monitor the audio on my end. There's nothing you can really do with the hearing of things. So, and I think it also leaves a little bit of a distraction or something to deal with. So there are headphones if people would like to use them, but not something that I put a lot of thought into.
Yeah, so this can be kind of a tricky one because when people first listen to a microphone monitored through headphones, it can kind of sound weird because it happens immediately, and it's almost like I don't know, an old telephone. You hear your voice, where now people aren't as used to that, so it's just kind of a weird feeling and can throw people off. And in his case, he's monitoring it, so that's fine. One maybe recommendation I would have is have a one of the people or the main host of the show wear headphones if possible, so they can help uh, monitor and just direct people to get closer to the microphone if for whatever reason they get off a little bit and the sound isn't getting picked up. So that's just one kind of caveat of people not wearing headphones is they won't, and if they're not used to talking on a microphone, being within a few inches, you'll find that people will start getting far away, and you'll lose some of the audio. So it's some plus and minuses there, but for the most part, I agree. It's not needed for the majority of the people. It's definitely good for someone to be monitoring though, so they can guide people back to the mics if needed.
So on the video front, again, I said I wanted 3 cameras, right? So we have a little bit of a hodgepodge setup, but it was just kind of stuff that I had laying around and stuff that I felt like was going to be probably good enough for what I needed it to do, right? So the center camera is actually what we're shooting on now, which is the A7 III. There's a Samyang like 18 millimeter wide angle lens on there. And then the 2 side cameras, there's an A6000 and A6300. The A6000 and A6300 are basically just running the kit lenses. The A6000 won't do 4K like the 6300 will, but the ATEM actually can't take in anything past 1080, so everything just gets.
So this is where the cost definitely adds up, but it sounds like he probably already had the main camera and maybe the other ones too. If it's a permanent setup and you only use those cameras for the show, it definitely can get costly. But if you have, you're using them for other video projects, and you just have maybe the stands already set up, pop them in and plug them in and start recording, that's a great way to go. And like you can see here, there's 3 different cameras. They don't have to all match. That can definitely help with editing and looks and everything, but it's definitely not needed. And if you're trying to do it on a budget, just use whatever you have. Even an iPhone. I don't know how well that would connect to some of this other equipment, but definitely use it.
Run in 1080. And so that was another reason I was like, I might as well just keep things pretty cheap. And from as far as I can tell, with a little bit of like color balancing and such like that, I've been able to get all 3 cameras to look pretty cohesive together and not feel like there's like a drastic quality loss or a cheaper camera in the mix. Those are built into what I just kind of call the command center desk. And basically those are pitched in the corners. The main camera is suspended off of what I do for.
And that's pretty cool. Where he's has the main camera is right off of the stand that holds the light. So that saves a ton of room. You don't have an extra tripod with legs sticking out, blocking the way. I really like that setup, and I might actually look into something similar. So pretty cool.
Or lighting, there's just a big C-stand in the middle of it. And so this was a great setup where, again, I didn't want tripods and things that you could be tripping over or having to set up camera especially. So they're just kind of bolted into the table. And, I luckily had thought it out enough and figured that with a setup like this, basically you can get the right angle that I was looking for without having to do something crazy with the cameras. So I'm really happy with how those are looking, and so far everything has been great on that front. So let's talk about the lighting setup and how that looks, right? So the main light here, this is what I'm using now, is a newer dish. I'm not quite sure the size, but I'd say it's a fairly good size. I originally purchased a lantern style thing that I thought would fill out the space a little bit more, but I was unable to get the kind of the skirt that goes around it to kind of control the light a little bit more. And luckily this thing has been great. So this gets boomed in just off of a C stand. There is an SL60W, a Godox SL60W.
I actually have two of these same lights. They're awesome. They're pretty quiet. You can adjust how bright they go. And I think mine came with some big, whatever, soft boxes too. There's one right behind me here. So, yeah, no, they're awesome. I guess they would be the budget option, but they're not, probably not the cheapest, but they're not the Aperture, I don't know, $700 light or whatever, however much those are. This is a great way to go.
That is the key light, and that basically just is boomed in straight over top of the 4 people. So it's a pretty even light that gets sprayed across. I think it probably bounces off the table a little bit, and so far I haven't had any issues with that. The hair light are basically these small LED bicolor, probably newer light panels as well. I'm sure.
I was just thinking I probably need to look into some better lighting for me because I have these lights behind me, but I think I need to get a few more stands or something to get them on my face so I don't look so red, but that'll be for the next video, maybe, or next couple.
Sure, just about anything would do pretty well here, but these are affixed to the ceiling basically, along with the curtains, and kind of give me that hair light that you hopefully can see here. And that just kind of helps separate people from the background because the curtains are maybe 2.5 feet behind people talking here. So those are the 2 main lights. I usually leave those on a nice warm orange, and this is obviously a more pure white light. I'm not quite sure what the, I want to say like 5600 or something like that. I do custom white balances on all the cameras to kind of dial things in a little bit more, but between those things, I think things look pretty good. I guess the only other lighting contribution is the wall panel, and that there is that LED strip that you can kind of change around there, which again, I think gives it a little bit of color, a little bit of vibrance, and a little bit of differentiation between different shows, and a way to kind of customize your experience with everything. So bringing everything full circle, here is kind of the workflow on how things work from an audio video perspective. So audio captured from the Rode mics, XLR'd into the Rodecaster Pro system. I record internally on the Rodecaster Pro system, so people do have an instant audio file only of the performance.
So the Rodecaster Pro has a SD card slot, and you can record directly to it, and that's a great way to just make sure you have a good audio source. It's direct in there. It's always good to have kind of redundancies anyway, so let's keep watching.
But what I do is I take one of the outputs from the Rodecaster and I plug that into the ATEM Mini Pro ISO, which is my live switcher for the cameras. So those 2 pieces of gear are the biggest powerhouses of this whole thing. I haven't had any issues with any sort of delay. I noticed that some people probably have, but I've noticed that running audio directly out from the Rodecaster Pro into the ATEM Mini ISO works flawlessly.
That's good to hear. I know the Rodecaster Pro 2 has an even crazier processor. It's a lot faster and more cores and all that stuff. So if for whatever reason you need more power, the Rodecaster Pro 2 has more than it could ever use, and just extra security. Plus, there's also a delay function, so you can delay the audio on purpose if for whatever reason you need to sync things up. So just a few more features that are available if you get the newer one.
And great, to be honest. The reason that I went with the ATEM Mini Pro ISO was a couple of reasons. If you want to have any sort of live viewing, like a live monitor out, which I have on just a everyday kind of computer screen here that I can see what's happening and live cut it, you need to upgrade to the Pro from the ATEM Mini. And then what you get with the ISO is you basically get the ability to record all of the camera inputs individually. So how this works is you're basically taking.
So it sounds like he chose the exact model they would need. I know sounds like, you get the Pro to make sure you have an extra output, ISO for the individual camera angles. Definitely the way I would go. you want to have those separately, whether you want to edit later or um, just to have redundancies, things like that. So seems like a good choice.
Taking the clean HDMI out from each of these cameras that go into the A10 Mini and recording off of that, you don't need to have SD cards in the cameras to be recording. There is no every camera is going to get individually recorded unless I turn on the ISO mode, which again creates massive files. But if you did want to have that flexibility of being able to go back and individually cut things or handle the editing a little bit more specifically in post, I thought that that would be a useful thing to have and worthwhile doing. So that's why I went with the ISO. But to bring it back, the 3 cameras feed into the A10 Mini Pro ISO. And then basically that is recorded live switched by me to a Samsung T5 SSD hard drive. I have heard and I've done enough research and I've talked to Blackmagic support about this, and they said that you should definitely get a T5 SSD, and I haven't had any trouble with that. So formatted that, everything runs into there. The beauty of this whole thing is that once I name what the project or the file is going to be, I plug in the hard drive, I hit go, the audio is synced up, everything is clean coming from the Rodecaster Pro, runs into the ATEM, the cameras are already all set, white balanced, everything, the angles look great. You live switch that, and by the time you hit end, it'll spit out a finished file, finished in that sense, a finished file that you're ready to pretty much go and use.
Just, it's so nice to be able to have everything set up and just have minimal input to start recording. It makes creating so much faster. You're more likely to kind of focus on the product, the creation, or the story, whatever it is, and you don't have to worry about spending time setting up equipment. It saves a ton of time. So it's awesome when you're able to do that. And even little things like if you're not creating a video podcast, but you just have a normal audio podcast, something like a boom arm, so you can just pull your microphone down, and you're ready to go, and when you're done, you slide it away, and you can continue working. So little things to make your workflow, your time easier, and your desk cleaner. Definitely helpful.
You don't have to go through and kind of just recut all the cameras and stuff like that, which is saving me and everyone else a huge chunk of time. So if you're a solo man operation, this whole setup might not be as ideal for you, because you would still need to switch things yourself, which I see people do. But I assume that I will be, or someone else be, running the podcast from the other side of this table here for the majority of the work. And so that kind of just keeps everything super easy. So when clients come in, they have the ability to pretty much leave shortly after. I'll just upload something to Dropbox immediately, and they can see what they recorded for that day, which is a huge plus. One thing I didn't talk about much was the acoustic side of thing, and frankly, this is the thing that probably needs the most improvement here as of now. There are some things happening behind the scenes to get this better. I think it would have been better if we had a dedicated room to this, but the space that I'm in just didn't have that as an option, so we kind of had to make do. So there are a series of acoustic panels on the back wall there. We will be putting in sound blankets that are going to be bolted to the ceiling to hopefully help some of the reverb there. There's a whole bunch of extra space on that side of the studio that I think a lot of the sound echoes off of, and so we're having a couple of additional sound blankets and curtains put in over there. And I think between those changes, as well as the fairly thick carpet that's beneath us, and the just great technology for the noise canceling that's built into these mics and in the Rodecaster, I think we'll be pretty much set to a point, especially where people will not notice and or complain. And I think that that's to me good enough.
Yeah, sounds like he's got the right idea. Making the right improvements. It looked like those sound panels, I mean, that definitely help, but there's still quite a bit of space in between them. You could really fill that in if you, especially in a big space where sound is going to bounce off everywhere. But it sounds like he's doing the right things, and those will definitely help, doing the stuff from the ceiling and kind of surrounding the space a little more. That'll improve the kind of the reverb and echo by 10 times, I'm sure.
I'm sure there are some audiophiles that would not be happy to hear that, but for my purposes, and I think for 99% of everyone else's, this has been great. All right, and I think that that about wraps it up. So that
All right, so that's it. This is an awesome, um, I would say, kind of budget to mid-range video podcasting setup. You know, you didn't spend the most on the stands or the microphones. The headphones are basic but good enough, and if you're not going to use them anyway, why spend a ton? So you can always upgrade stuff later. One thing I'd probably change the boom arms sooner than later, or change the stands into kind of a built-in boom arm type setup. But it works fine, and they're low profile; they don't get in the way, so looks good. He's working on the audio quality stuff, so or the acoustics of the room, which you work with what you have. I sort of have a similar issue where I have a room here, but then behind me is a giant sort of storage slash garage area, and I really need to get a thicker curtain in order to really separate the space. But you kind of do these things incrementally as you go. But I have panels on the ceiling and all the way around me here, and I covered the windows with some acoustic stuff. So just over time, slowly made improvements as I kind of decided I need them. So that is how I built my video podcasting studio in 2022. Thanks for watching, and thanks for the video, Innova Digital.